The garage door was open. That's what I noticed first. Standing at the kitchen window with my coffee going cold, staring out at the backyard in the early April light. The door was rolled all the way up, the inside dark even with the morning sun coming through. Frank never left it open overnight. 41 years of marriage, and that man never once left that door open. He said it was about the tools, said damp air was the enemy of good steel. But I think it was more than that. The garage was his place, and you don't leave your place open to the world when you're done for the night. But Frank was gone. 7 months now. I set my coffee down on the counter and stood there another minute, just looking. The yard needed mowing. I kept meaning to call someone. A robin was pulling a worm from the grass near the fence, completely unbothered by anything. Lucky bird. I went out the back door in my slippers. The morning air was warm for April, the kind of warm that feels like a promise. Frank would have been out there already on a morning like this, bent over that car with a rag in his hand and the radio playing something from the 70s. The concrete was cold under my feet. I stopped in the middle of the garage and looked at the empty space where the Mustang should have been. The oil stain on the floor was still there. 22 years of the same car sitting in the same spot leaves a mark that doesn't go away easy. But the car was gone. Just gone. Like a tooth pulled clean, and nothing left but the ache where it used to be. Frank's workbench ran along the back wall exactly as he'd left it. Every tool hung on the pegboard, each one outlined in black marker so he'd know at a glance if something was missing. His red toolbox sat closed on the bench. His work journal lay open beside it, pages and pages of his small, careful handwriting, notes and measurements and dates going back over 2 decades. I walked to the bench and picked up the journal. The last entry was dated 6 weeks before he died. Almost done. 22 years on this beauty. Maggie's going to drive her first. I already decided. Our Route 66 trip starts next summer. I promised her. I keep my promises. I closed the journal, held it against my chest. The garage still smelled like him. Motor oil and old leather and that orange hand soap he kept by the utility sink. I could almost hear the music. He'd sing along when he thought I wasn't listening. Creedence Clearwater Revival mostly, sometimes the Eagles. Never well, always loud. A car engine sounded out on Clearwater Drive. I turned. Bobby's black BMW pulled into the driveway. Leased, not bought. He'd told me that at Easter like I should be impressed. My son climbed out of the driver's side, 38 years old, shoulders already hunched, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Even from across the yard I could read him. I'd been reading him since he was 4 days old. The passenger door opened. Serena stepped out. She was perfect the way she always was. Hair smooth and dark, designer sunglasses, clothes that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She stood beside the car and looked at me standing in the open garage, and even with the sunglasses I could feel her watching, the way you feel a draft before you find the window. Bobby walked toward me slowly, stopped at the edge of the driveway. "Mom," I waited. "I need to talk to you about something." "Where's the car, Bobby?" His jaw tightened, just slightly. "That's what I need to talk to you about." "Where is it?" He looked at the empty garage, then at the ground. "I sold it." The words landed, but my brain needed a moment to translate them, like he'd spoken in a language I used to know, but hadn't heard in a long time. "You what?" "I sold it, 2 days ago." He still wouldn't look at me. "I needed the money, Mom. Serena has been planning this Paris trip for months. It's important. Business connections, people she needs to meet. I couldn't let her down." The tightness in my chest spread outward. My hands started shaking, so I crossed my arms. "That was your father's car. It was just sitting there." His voice went defensive, harder. "Dad's gone. You don't even drive it." It was his. Bobby finally looked at me. His eyes were red around the edges, tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. "I got a good price for it. $17,000. That's fair for a car that old." "There's $17,000. For a car Frank had spent every weekend of the last 22 years working on. For a car he'd restored piece by piece, part by part, with the same hands that coached Bobby's Little League team and held mine in the hospital when my mother was dying. For a car he'd promised would stay in this family. I wanted to grab my son and shake him until he understood what he'd done. 40 years as an ICU nurse teaches you to keep your voice steady when everything inside you is breaking. You learn to breathe through it, assess, Respond without reacting. When did you take it? Day before yesterday. You were at your book club. He still had his key. The one from when he lived here, before he moved out, before he met her. I never asked for it back. And Frank always left the garage unlocked. Said he wanted to be able to get in there fast if he thought of something. You should have asked me first. Would you have said yes? No. Serena walked up then. She moved like she owned the driveway. Stood beside Bobby and put her hand on his arm, red nails against his jacket sleeve. Maggie. Her voice was pleasant and reasonable, like she was explaining something simple to someone who was having trouble keeping up. We're not going to keep discussing this. The car is sold. We leave for Paris on Thursday. I looked at her. Really looked. She'd been married to my son for 2 years, and I still didn't know her. Didn't know where she grew up, what her parents did. Anything real about the life she'd had before Bobby. She smiled a lot, but I'd spent 4 decades watching faces, and her smiles never moved past her mouth. This is between me and my son. I'm his wife. She squeezed Bobby's arm. What's between you and him is between all 3 of us. Bobby needed that money. The car was sitting unused. It made practical sense. It was his father's. His father is gone. She said it flat, matter of fact. And Bobby is trying to build a life. Surely you can understand that, Maggie. I didn't trust myself to speak. I looked at Bobby. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Serena's hand stayed on his arm, and I noticed, the way you notice things when you've spent your career paying attention to details other people miss, that her grip wasn't comforting. It was positioning. She was showing me where he stood. We'll send you photos from Paris, Serena said, smiling. You'd love it there. The museums, the architecture, very romantic. The casual cruelty of that last word hung in the air between us. Maybe she didn't know what she was saying, or maybe she knew exactly. Bobby shifted his weight. We should go. Still have packing to do. We do. Serena tugged his arm gently, already turning. Take care of yourself, Maggie. We'll see you when we get back. They walked to the BMW. Bobby glanced back once, just once, and saw me standing in the garage in Frank's space with my arms crossed and my slippers on the cold concrete. Then he got in the car. Serena's window came down. Take care, Maggie. The BMW backed out of my driveway and drove away. I watched until it turned at the end of Clearwater Drive. Then I was alone. I went back to the workbench and picked up the journal again. Read Frank's last entry one more time. I promised her. I keep my promises. His coffee mug sat on the shelf above the bench, handle worn smooth from years of the same grip. I'd washed it after he died, but couldn't bring myself to put it away. Everything was here except the car. And the man who built it. I locked the garage, turned off the light, and walked back to the house with the journal in my hands. The phone rang at 6:58 the next morning. I'd been awake since 4, sitting at the kitchen table with the journal open in front of me, reading the same page over and over. The entry where Frank documented replacing the carburetor, his handwriting so precise, his measurements exact down to the thousandth of an inch. That was Frank. He didn't approximate. He got it right, or he started over. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mrs. Lawson? A man's voice, rough around the edges, like something was caught in his throat. My name is Dale Whitfield. I run Whitfield Classic Motors out on the east side. I have your husband's car. I sat up straight. The Mustang? Yes, ma'am. Your son brought it in 2 days ago. A pause. I need you to come to the dealership, Mrs. Lawson. As soon as you can. There's something Frank wanted you to know. I don't understand. Frank was my friend. His voice cracked on that last word. A good friend. I was at his funeral. I don't know if you saw me. I should have spoken to you then. I'm sorry I didn't. Please, Mrs. Lawson, can you come? I remembered him vaguely. A man standing near the back at the funeral home. Gray hair, dark suit, eyes red. He'd left before I made it through the receiving line. I wrote down the address on the back of an envelope and told him 30 minutes. Whitfield Classic Motors sat at the end of a long industrial street on the east side of town. The building was clean and modern, rows of vintage cars gleaming behind a chain-link fence in the early morning sun. A man stood outside the main entrance, watching for me. He was maybe 67, gray-haired, jeans and a button-down shirt. When I parked and got out, he walked toward me with his hand already extended and his eyes already wet. Mrs. Lawson, thank you for coming. You're Dale? Yes, ma'am. His handshake was firm, but his hand was trembling. Your husband saved my life 28 years ago. I waited. He looked at the ground, collected himself, looked back up. I had a dream of opening this business. No bank would touch me. Bad credit, no collateral, just stubbornness and a lot of wishful thinking. Frank co-signed my business loan, risked his own credit, his savings, everything, for a man he'd only known 8 months. He never told me that. He wouldn't have. Dale shook his head slowly. That's who Frank was. I paid back every penny of the loan, but what I owed him, that never got paid back. This dealership exists because your husband believed in me when nobody else did. He wiped one eye with the back of his hand. When your son came in 2 days ago with that Mustang, I knew it the second I laid eyes on it. Frank showed me pictures over the years. Talked about it every time we ran into each other at shows and auctions. He was so proud of what he was building. Bobby told you the price was fair. Dale's expression shifted. Something uncomfortable crossed his face. That's why I called you, Mrs. Lawson. Your son had no idea what he was selling. He met my eyes. I asked him directly if he knew the value. He said $17,000 seemed about right for a car that old. My stomach dropped before he even said the number. What is it actually worth? Around $210,000. Dale said it quietly, like he was sorry. It's a documented 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback, one of fewer than 1,400 still in existence. Frank restored it to museum certification standard. The documentation alone adds $40,000 to the value. $210,000 is probably conservative. The number didn't make sense. My brain kept trying to reorder it. Put the decimal somewhere else, drop a zero. Bobby sold it for 17. Yes, ma'am. I sat down on the curb, just sat down right there in the parking lot. Dale sat beside me. We stayed like that for a while, neither of us speaking, the morning sun warming the back of my neck. I bought it from him, Dale said finally. Paid him the 17 because that's what he asked, and he seemed desperate. Said something about a trip to Paris. He paused. But Mrs. Lawson, that car was never mine to keep. Frank made sure of that. I looked at him. What do you mean? Dale stood and offered me his hand. Come inside. There's something you need to see. He led me through the showroom and into the garage. White floors, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. 3 cars parked in a row under canvas covers. Dale stopped at the last one and pulled the cover back. The Mustang stood there in the light. Navy blue paint, deep as still water. Chrome fittings, bright as mirrors. Every line exactly as Frank had described it to me across 1,000 dinner tables over 22 years. I walked toward it slowly, put my hand on the hood. The metal was cool and smooth. I could feel Frank in every inch of it. I opened the driver's door and sat down in the leather seat. It smelled like the garage at home. The steering wheel was worn in exactly 2 places where his hands had rested. On the passenger visor, someone had tucked a small photograph. Frank and me at a car show, maybe 15 years ago. He was pointing at something off camera, laughing. I was watching him instead of wherever he was pointing. I had forgotten that photograph existed. Dale leaned against the doorframe and let me have a moment. Then, 2 years before he died, Frank asked me to help him install something in this car, a hidden compartment. He gestured toward the dashboard, behind the radio face. He said if anything ever happened to him, he needed to make sure you knew about it. Made me promise. Made me swear. Why didn't he just tell me himself? He said he needed to be sure first, that there were things he was still working out. Dale's voice went careful. He was very specific, Mrs. Lawson. He said what was in that compartment was for you and only you. He showed me how to release the panel. Press here, pull there. The radio face came away from the dash, and behind it was a space, dark, maybe 6 inches deep, 10 inches wide. Dale stepped back, walked out of the garage, left me alone. I reached in. My hand touched paper. I pulled out a manila folder, thick and heavy, rubber-banded closed. Under it was a sealed white envelope with my name on the front in Frank's handwriting. And underneath everything, a small wooden box with a brass latch. Inside the box was a key on a paper tag. First Consolidated Bank, Box 312. I opened the envelope first. Frank's handwriting filled both sides of the page, dated 2 months before he died. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't tell you while I was alive. You would have wanted to handle this together, and I know that, and I know I was wrong to carry it alone. But I needed to protect you from it until I had enough proof. I'm not there yet. I'm hoping I get there. I have been investigating Serena for 20 months. She is not who she says she is. Her real name is Linda Pruitt. She has done this before, twice that I've confirmed, possibly more. In this folder is everything I've gathered. Photographs, documents, contact information for the men she hurt before Bobby. Their stories are the same. Maggie. She targets men with aging mothers and family assets. She is going to come after our house. That is her pattern. She will convince Bobby that you are declining, that you need care, that the house should be sold for your own good. Then she will take the money and disappear. I confronted her once, carefully, just enough to watch her reaction. She's very good at what she does. Bobby won't believe me without proof he can hold in his hands. I know my son. He loves her. He will defend her. The key in the box is for a safe deposit box at First Consolidated Bank on Millbrook Avenue. Go there. Open it. You'll understand when you do. Dale knows to call you if anything happens to this car. He's a good man. Trust him. Finish what I started, Maggie. Protect yourself. Protect our son. He is a victim in this too, even if he doesn't know it yet. I love you. I am still protecting you. Frank. I read it twice. Then I opened the manila folder. The photographs were paper-clipped to the top. Serena at a wedding. Different dress, different man. Older with gray at his temples. Another photograph. Different venue, different man, different year. Then the documents underneath. Photocopies of marriage certificates. Serena Holt married Edward Sutton. Denver, Colorado. April 2020. Serena Holt married Walter Pruitt. Nashville, Tennessee. February 2022. Newspaper clippings. Local man reports. Elderly mother's savings stolen by daughter-in-law. Another. Family business sold in suspected fraud case. Victim says he was manipulated. Page after page of Frank's handwriting. Notes dated over 20 months. Observations about Serena's behavior. Questions she'd asked about our house, about my health, about our assets. Times and dates. Every detail recorded in that same precise hand that logged carburetor specs and torque measurements. And at the back, written in Frank's careful print, 2 names, 2 phone numbers. Eddie Sutton, Denver. Walter Pruitt, Nashville. At the bottom of the last page, underlined twice. Need more concrete proof before telling Bobby. He won't believe me without it. She is too skilled. If you're reading this and I'm gone, finish it. Protect our son. I closed the folder. The tears that came weren't quiet ones. They were the deep kind, the ones that shake your whole body. The kind I hadn't let myself cry since the week after the funeral, when I finally understood that every single morning for the rest of my life was going to start without him. I sat in Frank's car and cried for everything he'd carried alone. For every night he'd sat in this garage with this folder while I was inside not knowing. For the last 20 months of his life that he'd spent trying to save our son from a woman neither of us had understood until now. Dale came back after a few minutes, stood in the doorway without speaking, just waited. I wiped my face, got out of the car, looked at him. He was still protecting me. My voice came out steadier than I expected. Dale nodded. That's who Frank was. I need to call these men. I held up the folder. Eddie and Walter. I need to hear what happened to them. You can use my office. He stepped aside. Take all the time you need. I looked at the Mustang one more time, at the car Frank spent 22 years building, the hidden compartment he'd installed with Dale's help, the investigation he had left for me to finish. Then I walked toward the office. She was not going to get away with this. Dale closed the office door behind me. Phone on the desk, Frank's folder open in front of me. I dialed the Denver number first. Eddie Sutton answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was careful and tired, the voice of a man who had practiced what to say if this call ever came. Mr. Sutton, my name is Margaret Lawson. I'm calling because my son is married to a woman named Serena Holt. A long silence, then a sound that wasn't quite a sigh and wasn't quite a groan. I've been waiting for someone to call. His story came out slowly, each piece placed like he was building something fragile. He was 59 years old. He'd met Serena in the spring of 2020 at the community center where his mother volunteered. She was helping organize events. She found Eddie afterward, introduced herself, said she admired what his mother did for the neighborhood. He'd just lost his wife 3 years before. He was lonely in the way that loneliness compounds on itself. They dated. She was patient and attentive. She made him feel, for the first time in 3 years, like maybe the second half of his life wasn't already written. He married her 7 months later. His mother had concerns, said something felt off, said Serena asked too many questions about the house. Eddie thought his mother was being protective in the way that mothers are. He didn't listen. After the wedding, the comments started. Small at first. Your mother seemed confused today, did you notice? She called me by the wrong name twice. Is that happening more often? Articles about early dementia appeared on the kitchen table, on the coffee table, on his nightstand. Eddie started noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before. Normal aging that suddenly looked like decline through the lens Serena had built. Then she found a memory care facility. The best in the state. She deserves the best, Eddie. Whatever it costs. $22,000 a month. The only way to afford it was to sell his mother's house. The house she'd lived in for 39 years. Eddie convinced his mother it was for her safety. The house sold for $310,000 and the money went into a joint account. 11 days later, Serena was gone. Account cleaned out. Phone disconnected. No forwarding address. My mother died 8 months later, Eddie said. His voice had gone very quiet. She kept asking when she could go home. I kept telling her soon. He paused. She was fine, Mrs. Lawson. A little forgetful. Normal aging. She didn't need that place. She needed her home. I closed my eyes. Whatever Serena is telling your son about you, don't believe it. Document everything. She starts small, then she builds. By the time you notice the pattern, she's already halfway done. Another pause. Stop her. Please, don't let her do to your family what she did to mine. I thanked him. Sat for a moment with my hand flat on the desk. Then I dialed Nashville. Walter Pruitt answered immediately. Walter Pruitt. I introduced myself. He made the same sound Eddie had. Recognition and exhaustion and the particular relief of someone who has been waiting a long time to be found. His story was different in the details and identical in its shape. He'd met Serena at his father's funeral in February 2022. She was there supporting a friend, she said. She found Walter in the parking lot afterward, offered her condolences, said she'd lost someone too, and understood the particular weight of it. They talked for 2 hours in the parking lot. He went home feeling less alone than he had in months. They married 9 months later. His father had left him a small auto repair shop, 45 years in business, the kind of place where people brought their cars and stayed to talk. Walter had inherited it, but didn't want to run it. Too many memories. Too much of his father's presence in every corner. Serena suggested selling. It's too much for you right now. Sell it, take the money. We'll travel, heal, start fresh somewhere new. It made sense to Walter at the time. It made the kind of sense that grief makes possible. The logic of someone who just wants the ache to stop. The shop sold for $220,000. 3 days after the check cleared, Serena was gone. She's very good at research, Walter said. She knew everything about me before she ever walked up in that parking lot. My father's shop, what it was worth, what I'd inherited, everything. I was a target before I was a person. A pause. Does your son have access to your assets, your house? Not yet, but I can see her setting the stage. Then you have time. Barely. Stop her before she gets him to sign anything. His voice sharpened. She's patient, Mrs. Lawson. She'll wait as long as she has to. I hung up and sat in the quiet of Dale's office for a long moment. Through the window I could see the garage, and through the garage door I could see the Mustang, the navy blue paint catching the morning light. Frank had known. Had spent 20 months alone with this knowledge, trying to build a case solid enough to show his son, trying to protect a boy who had no idea he needed protecting. Dale knocked and came in, set a cup of coffee on the desk without being asked, sat down across from me. Frank had someone else working with him, he said. A private investigator he trusted. Ray Colton, former detective, 20 years on the job. He slid a business card across the desk. Ray's been waiting. Frank made him promise not to contact you directly unless something happened. Something happened. I picked up the card, then I looked at Dale. What else do I need to know? He folded his hands on the desk. Frank built this very carefully, Maggie. He didn't leave anything to chance. A pause. He loved you a great deal, and he loved that boy. Whatever Bobby did with that car, Frank would tell you Bobby didn't know. That's why he needed the proof first. I stood up, picked up the folder, picked up the wooden box with the bank key inside. Tell me how to get to First Consolidated Bank on Millbrook Avenue. First Consolidated Bank on Millbrook Avenue was the kind of place that hadn't changed much since 1987. Dark wood paneling, carpet the color of old moss, tellers behind glass who still said good morning like they meant it. Frank had banked here since before we were married. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia Sellers, had sent a handwritten condolences card when Frank died. I still had it in the drawer by the bed. Patricia recognized me when I walked in. Mrs. Lawson, she came around from behind the counter. Warm handshake, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. What can I do for you today? I set the wooden box on the counter and showed her the key. I need to access a safe deposit box, box 312. My husband's name was on the account. Of course. She didn't hesitate. Let me pull up the records. She was back in 2 minutes. Frank added you as co-owner on this box in 2022. You have full access. She looked at me over her glasses. Whenever you're ready. The vault was in the back, behind a door that required 2 keys turned simultaneously, mine and Patricia's. The box was middle row, unremarkable, a gray steel rectangle like the 100 others surrounding it. Patricia left me in the small private room with the box on the table and the door pulled almost closed. I sat down, took a breath, lifted the lid. Inside was a single envelope, letter-sized, and beneath it a sleeve of protective plastic holding what looked like certificates of some kind. Cream-colored paper, formal printing, the kind of document that comes with a seal and a signature and the weight of officialdom. I opened the envelope first. Maggie. In 1996, I bought stock in a small technology company as a favor to a patient, a man named Howard Garrett who was dying of kidney disease. His son James was starting a company and needed early investors. Howard asked if I'd consider it. I gave James $5,000 and honestly didn't think much more about it. Howard died the following year. I lost touch with James. Life kept moving. I found these certificates last fall while I was going through the filing cabinet in the office, the one you've been telling me to clean out for 15 years. You were right, by the way. I should have cleaned it out sooner. I looked up Hartwell Technologies out of curiosity. Maggie, they went public 18 months ago. I nearly fell out of my chair. This is yours. This is for your security, your independence, your future. Don't let anyone convince you that you need to sell the house or move somewhere smaller or give up anything that is yours. You are taken care of. You are more than taken care of. Live well. Travel if you want to. Stay in that house as long as you want to stay. I love you. I keep my promises. Frank, I set the letter down and picked up the protective sleeve. Patricia came back to check on me after a few minutes. Found me sitting with the stock certificates in my hands, not moving. Are you all right, Mrs. Lawson? I need you to tell me what these are worth. She took the sleeve gently, examined the certificates, went to her computer in the corner of the room. The clicking of her keyboard was the only sound. I watched her face. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Patricia Sellers had the professional composure of someone who had worked in banking for 30 years and had learned not to react. But her eyebrows moved. Just slightly. She turned to face me. Hartwell Technologies went public 14 months ago. The stock has been climbing steadily since the IPO. A pause. Mrs. Lawson, these certificates are currently valued at approximately $387,000. I heard the number, understood the number. My brain simply refused to do anything useful with it for a long moment. Frank bought them for $5,000, I said. In 1996. Yes, ma'am. The records confirm the original purchase. Patricia set the sleeve carefully on the table in front of me. This is a significant asset. When you're ready, I can connect you with our investment team to discuss your options. I sat there for another minute. Just sat. Frank had left me financial security I hadn't known existed. Not because he'd been secretive, because he'd genuinely forgotten, the way you forget a $5 bet with a friend until the friend shows up at your door 20 years later with a check. Except this friend had become a publicly traded technology company worth considerably more than $5. $387,000. I wasn't in a weak position. I wasn't dependent on anyone. I had resources and options and room to maneuver, and Serena had no idea. I thanked Patricia, tucked the certificates carefully back into the sleeve, and put everything into my purse. Walked out into the April sunshine. Sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. Frank, I thought, you wonderful, infuriating, thorough man. Then I called Ray Colton. We met the next morning at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital where I'd spent 40 years of my life. Ray was already there when I arrived. Corner booth, back to the wall. A man who'd spent 20 years as a detective and still positioned himself out of habit where he could see the whole room. He was 57, gray at the temples, with the kind of stillness that comes from years of watching people and waiting. He stood when I came in, shook my hand. Mrs. Lawson, I'm glad you called. Maggie. I sat down across from him. Frank would have wanted you to call me Maggie. Something in his expression softened. He talked about you constantly. Every time I saw him, at least 5 minutes about Maggie. What you'd done that week, something funny you'd said, how you'd handled some situation at the hospital. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. He was very proud of you. He was investigating Serena for 20 months and didn't tell me. He was protecting you. Ray said it simply, without apology. He needed to be sure before he brought it to you. He knew Bobby. Knew that boy would defend her with everything he had until the evidence was undeniable. A pause. Frank also knew that once you knew, you'd act. He wanted to have everything in place before you had to act. He opened the folder he'd brought. What Ray had gathered in the months since Frank's death was meticulous and damning. Digital records showing Serena active on caregiver support forums under a fake name, asking questions about how to identify signs of cognitive decline in resistant elderly people, how to approach conversations about assisted living with family members who were in denial, what documentation was needed to establish power of attorney. Credit card statements. 3 cards in Bobby's name, totaling $38,000 in debt that Bobby almost certainly didn't know existed. The charges told a story. Designer clothing stores, high-end restaurants, spa appointments, a luxury hotel in Paris, the hotel already booked, the reservation confirmed, paid in full on one of those cards 2 weeks ago. Bobby's salary is $68,000 a year, Ray said. This lifestyle costs nearly double that. She's been building debt in his name for at least 14 months. I thought about Bobby in that garage, telling me $17,000 was a fair price. He needed money desperately. Of course he did. He just didn't know why. Ray showed me the projected timeline he'd developed based on the patterns from Denver and Nashville. Phase 1 was the Paris trip, building the fantasy, making Bobby feel like this was the life they deserved, the life they'd have if only certain obstacles were removed. Phase 2 would begin within 1 to 3 months of their return. Gentle concern about Maggie. She seemed tired. She forgot something. I'm worried. Seeds planted slowly, like any good gardener knows to do. Phase 3, 4 to 6 months out. The case for professional care. Articles left where Bobby would find them. A facility recommended. She deserves the best. Phase 4, 6 to 8 months. The conversation about selling the house. Maggie's house was paid off, worth approximately $330,000 on the current market. Combined with whatever other assets Serena could access, Ray estimated her projected take at over $400,000. She's patient, Ray said. That's what makes her effective. She doesn't rush. She builds the story until the person she's working on believes it completely and thinks the conclusion was their own idea. Can the police stop her now? Not yet. She hasn't committed a crime in this state. The previous cases were in Colorado and Tennessee. Until she takes money or commits documented fraud here, local law enforcement can't act. He paused. But I've been in contact with detectives in both states. They want her. The moment she makes her move here, we have a path. So we wait. We build, we document, we prepare. Ray leaned forward. And Bobby has to see the truth himself, Maggie. If you come to him with this before he's ready, she'll spend 20 minutes convincing him that his mother is paranoid and grieving and not thinking clearly. She'll make your concern into evidence of your decline. I understood. I had watched enough families fall apart in the ICU, watched people choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, to understand exactly what Ray was saying. What do I do first? Go home. Write down every single thing you've noticed over the last 2 years, every odd question, every comment about your health. Every time she took a photograph of a room or asked about a document. Everything. He closed his folder. You've been paying attention. I can see that. Now we make it official. I spent that evening at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen, and I wrote for 3 hours. Bobby calling to ask where I kept the house deed, 3 months ago, framed as a question about what would happen to the deed if something happened to me. Serena photographing every room of the house during a visit 6 weeks ago, holding her phone up casually, saying she was just sending pictures to her decorator friend who did estate planning. Bobby asking 5 weeks ago whether I'd forgotten about a lunch we'd supposedly scheduled. A lunch I had no memory of making because it had never been made. Serena leaving a brochure for Sunrise Valley Senior Living on the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago. Oh, that fell out of my bag. I'm so sorry. I was just doing some research for a friend. Red nails tucking it away, smile that didn't reach her eyes. 2 weeks ago at dinner, Serena saying, Maggie, you look exhausted. Are you sleeping? It's so hard at your age, I've heard, keeping up a house this size. The pattern was there, had been building for months. I'd noticed each piece individually and filed it away without seeing what it added up to. Nurses do that. We observe details and store them separately, waiting for the clinical picture to emerge. The clinical picture had emerged. I closed the legal pad and held it against my chest the way I'd held Frank's journal that first morning in the garage. He saw it before I did. Spent 20 months watching something I lived beside every day without fully seeing. I'm still protecting you. Outside, the spring evening was warm and quiet and ordinary. A neighbor's dog was barking at something. A car drove slowly down Clearwater Drive. I went to bed, and for the first time since Frank died, I slept through the night. They came back from Paris on a Tuesday, both tanned. Bobby looked tired despite the rest, stress lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before the trip. Serena looked exactly as she always did, perfect and composed, like someone who didn't accumulate wear. I'd invited them for dinner. Pot roast in the slow cooker since morning, the same recipe I'd made every Sunday for 40 years. It was Frank's favorite. Bobby's too, since he was old enough to sit at the table. They arrived at 6, Serena in clothes I hadn't seen before. Silk blouse the color of cream, tailored jeans, a bag that probably cost more than my first car. She hugged me at the door with both arms and let go first. I played my part perfectly, set the table with the good dishes, opened the wine Bobby brought, asked about the trip with genuine-seeming interest. Serena painted a picture of a Paris I could almost see, the hotel near the Marais, the lunch near the Louvre, the dinner at a restaurant whose name I couldn't pronounce. She was a skilled storyteller. I gave her that. It made me realize how much we're missing, she said, ladling gravy without being invited to. Bobby works so hard. We have so little to show for it. She looked at me when she said it. The meaning was directional, aimed. Bobby picked it up on cue. Mom, you should think about traveling too. You always talked about it. Route 66, all of that. You shouldn't wait. Maybe someday. Serena set down the gravy boat and leaned forward slightly. Maggie, this house really is quite large for one person. Have you given any thought to downsizing? Something more manageable, easier to maintain. There it was, Phase 2 arriving right on Ray's schedule. I'm managing fine. This is my home. Of course. Her smile stayed pleasant and reasonable. We just care about your safety. The stairs, the yard work. It's genuinely a lot for someone your age. Bobby nodded. We worry about you here alone, Mom. We, not I. Serena's worry coming out of Bobby's mouth in Bobby's voice. I had documented that exact linguistic pattern in 3 pages of Ray's materials, how she gradually replaced the pronoun until her concerns and her husband's became indistinguishable. I appreciate the concern. I'm fine. Serena let it go, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes, the brief adjustment, the filing away of information, the decision about how hard to push and when. She had done this before. She knew the rhythm of it. You plant, you water, you come back later. After dinner, we moved to the living room, coffee and apple pie. Serena excused herself. Bathroom down the hall, she said. She was gone 11 minutes. I waited 5, then excused myself. I found her upstairs, near the door of Frank's home office. The hallway bathroom door was open and dark behind her. She startled when she heard me on the stairs. Oh, a laugh, hand to her chest. I got completely turned around. This house has so many rooms. I feel terrible. The bathroom is downstairs. First door on the left, same as always. Of course, too much wine with dinner. Another laugh, touching my arm. Silly me. I walked her back downstairs without another word, watched her settle back onto the sofa beside Bobby, cross her ankles, pick up her coffee cup. Within 30 seconds, she was telling a story about a couple they'd met in Paris. Nothing in her face or her voice indicated that anything unusual had occurred. She was very good. After they left, I went straight to my legal pad and wrote everything down. Time, location, duration, exact words. Then I called Ray. She went upstairs, I said, toward Frank's office. 11 minutes. Noted. A pause. How did dinner go otherwise? She opened with the downsizing conversation. Bobby echoed it. Faster than I projected. She must feel the timeline is secure. Ray was quiet for a moment. She's confident, Maggie. Confident people make mistakes. When do we move? Soon, but Bobby has to be first. I called Bobby the next morning. I need to talk to you about something. Can you come by? Just you. What's it about? Your father. Something I found in his things. Silence. Then, Maggie and I don't keep secrets. Serena and I said gently. Her name is Serena. A longer silence. Right, sorry, Serena. Another pause. She and I don't keep secrets, Mom. This is between you and me. Please, Bobby. He came that afternoon. Alone, as I'd asked, though he told me he'd told Serena where he was going. He looked nervous getting out of the car, hands in his pockets, that familiar hunch to his shoulders. I had coffee ready. Frank's investigation folder on the kitchen table. Bobby saw the folder and his shoulders went tight before he'd even sat down. Mom, if this is about the car, sit down. I need you to really listen to me. Can you do that? This feels like an ambush. It's protection. Please sit down. He sat, arms crossed, defensive before I'd said a word. I used my ICU voice, the one I'd developed over 40 years for delivering news that would change someone's life. Calm, clear, factual. No emotion in the delivery, because emotion gives people something to argue with instead of the information itself. Before I show you anything, I want you to know that your father loved you more than anything in this world. That is the context for everything I'm about to tell you. Bobby's expression shifted slightly, some of the defensiveness behind his eyes replaced by something more uncertain. Your father spent the last 20 months of his life investigating Serena. The reaction was instant. Mom, let me finish. I held up my hand. He wasn't being controlling. He wasn't interfering. He found something specific and he built a case. I slid Frank's letter across the table. Read this first. Bobby took it. His color drained as he read. I watched it happen, watched the blood leave his face the way I'd watched it leave 1,000 faces over 40 years. He read it once, then read the first paragraph again. Dad never liked her. His voice came out low and tight. He was paranoid about everything those last few years. This doesn't mean, look at the photographs. I spread them on the table. Serena at 2 different weddings, 2 different men, 2 different dresses, 2 different venues, 2 different years. Then the marriage certificates. I placed them beside the photographs without speaking. Bobby stared. His mouth opened, then closed. This could be someone with the same name, he said finally. Serena isn't an unusual name. Holt isn't. Call them. I slid the paper with the phone numbers across the table. Frank's handwriting. Eddie Sutton, Denver. Walter Pruitt, Nashville. Those are the men she was married to. They're real people. Call them and ask about their wives. Bobby stood up, started pacing the length of the kitchen. I recognized the movement, had watched him do it since he was 9 years old when something was too big to sit still with. This is insane. She loves me. We were just in Paris together. You want me to call strangers, and they're not strangers. They're the men whose families she destroyed before she found yours. Mom. He turned, and his face was something I hadn't seen on him in years, raw and young and frightened. Why are you doing this? Can't you just let me be happy? My throat tightened. Because your father died carrying this. He spent the last months of his life trying to protect you, and I'm not going to let that be for nothing. Bobby grabbed the paper with the phone numbers, crumpled it in his fist, walked to the door. Bobby, he stopped with his hand on the door frame, didn't turn around. I know you think you're helping, he said. His voice was rough. I know you miss Dad. I know you're still grieving. But this, he shook his head. This isn't what he would have wanted. He walked out. The door didn't slam. He closed it quietly, which was somehow worse. I sat at the table alone. The photographs still spread across the wood surface. The marriage certificates side by side. I didn't know if he would call those numbers, or go straight home to Serena, or simply file this away as his mother's grief making her unreasonable. The choice was his now. I had done what I could. Frank had done what he could. The rest depended on Bobby. The waiting was its own kind of agony. I cleaned the house, pulled weeds in the garden, read 3 chapters of a novel without retaining a single sentence, made a grocery list and then left it on the counter when I drove to the store, came home with completely different things. Ray called at 8 that evening. How did it go? He was angry, didn't believe it, left. Give him time. A pause. He's going to sit with those names, Maggie. That's how Bobby was built, his father told me. He's stubborn until he isn't, and when he turns all the way. She'll get to him first. Maybe, but Frank planted the seed years before he died. That doesn't disappear overnight. I sat in the kitchen after we hung up, the legal pad and the folder and the coffee cup and the photograph of Frank from the car's visor, which I'd brought home and set on the table beside the salt shaker. Still protecting you. At 12:17 in the morning, my phone lit up. Bobby. I picked it up before the second ring. Mom. His voice was completely destroyed. Raw and broken and young in a way I hadn't heard since he was a little boy with a nightmare. I called them. Mom. I called them both. I pressed my hand flat against the table. What did they say? Everything. A shaking breath. Eddie's, his mother, and Walter's father's shop. It's the same story. Exactly the same story. He was crying. I could hear him trying to stop and failing. I went home and I was so angry. At you. At Dad. I thought you were both just... I know. But I kept thinking about the marriage certificates. So I decided to just ask her. Simple things. Where she grew up, what her maiden name was. Tell me about your family. His voice broke apart again. The answers were different, Mom. Not a little different. Completely different. Different hometown, different college, different everything from what she'd told me before. What did you do? I pushed. Asked about the credit cards. The ones Ray found. The ones in my name. His voice went flat. Her face changed. Like something underneath came through. She said they were business investments, that I wouldn't understand, so I asked her to show me the statements. I said they're in my name. I have a right to see them. What did she say? She said she didn't have to prove anything to me, that a husband should trust his wife. A pause. So I said I wanted to see them anyway. I kept saying it. And he stopped, started again. She packed a bag. Right then. Didn't explain, didn't argue anymore. Just started putting things in a bag. And she said... His voice cracked completely. She said I was weak. She said I was just like all the others. And then she walked out and got in her car and drove away. I was already standing. Where are you? Still at the apartment. I've been calling her phone for 2 hours. She won't answer. Stay there. Don't go anywhere. I'm calling Ray right now. I hung up and dialed Ray before I'd crossed the kitchen. He answered on the first ring. She's running, I said. I know. His voice was alert, already moving. I've been tracking her through the credit card activity. She made 3 cash withdrawals in the last 2 hours, 11,000 total, and she just booked a flight. My stomach dropped. Where? Mexico City. Departure 5:45 a.m. One way. I looked at the clock. It was 12:31 in the morning. 5 hours. Can we stop her? Ray was quiet for 3 seconds. I've been on the phone with the detectives in Colorado and Tennessee for the last hour. There's a warrant process in motion. But Maggie... A pause. I found something else. Something I wasn't expecting. Tell me. Serena Holt is a stolen identity. The real Serena Holt died in a car accident in 2019. His voice was steady but careful, like someone delivering a diagnosis. This woman's real name is Linda Pruitt. She's wanted for fraud in 2 states. There are 6 confirmed victims going back 8 years. This is not opportunistic. This is organized, methodical, and she is very experienced at disappearing. 6 victims, 8 years. Bobby was not the first and would not have been the last. What do you need from us? Bobby's statement about the forged credit cards. That gives federal jurisdiction. With his statement, I can get the FBI field office to issue an airport hold. A pause. Can Bobby do that tonight? I thought about my son sitting in his apartment with his phone going unanswered. Yes, I said. He can. At 3 in the morning, Ray sat at my kitchen table across from Bobby and me. Bobby looked like someone had taken him apart and put him back together slightly wrong. Red eyes, unshaven, hands wrapped around a coffee mug he wasn't drinking from. He'd arrived 20 minutes ago and hadn't said much, just sat down and stayed. Ray laid it out without softening it. Linda Pruitt, 6 victims, 8 years, the warrant, the 5:45 flight, the window closing. This means it becomes public, Ray said. You'll likely need to testify. Your name will be connected to this case. He looked at Bobby steadily. Are you prepared for that? Bobby looked at me. I thought about what to say, thought about Frank sitting in that garage for 20 months, alone with this folder, doing what he could with the time he had. Your father spent the last months of his life building this case, I said, not for revenge, so she couldn't do this to another family, another Bobby, another mother who didn't know until the garage door was open. Bobby was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his mug, straightened his back, and nodded. Tell me where to sign. Ray made the call. I heard him give Bobby's name, our address, the account numbers from the credit cards. Heard the words Federal Hold and Airport Security and confirmed warrant. We left for the airport at 4:15. The city was dark and still, streetlights reflecting off wet pavement from an overnight rain. Bobby sat in the back seat and looked out the window at nothing. I reached back and put my hand over his. He held on without looking away from the window. The last thing Frank built was not a car. It was this moment, these people, this chain of carefully placed pieces leading to a dark car on a quiet street at 4 in the morning. The hidden compartment, the letter, the folder, Dale, Ray, the bank key. All of it connected, all of it pointing here. I keep my promises. He did, Frank. He really did. The airport was just waking up when we arrived. That particular hour before dawn has its own quality. The coffee shops pulling up their gates, fluorescent lights humming overhead at a frequency that feels slightly too honest, business travelers moving through the terminal with the practiced efficiency of people who have done this too many times to find it interesting. Normal life, going about its business. We parked in the short-term lot and walked through the main entrance together. Ray positioned us without making it obvious, behind a wide structural column near the security checkpoint, far enough back to observe without being seen. 2 FBI agents in plain clothes were already in position near the screening lanes, identifiable to Ray but invisible to everyone else. Bobby hadn't spoken since we left the car. He stood beside me with his arms at his sides, watching the security line begin to fill as the early flights drew closer. I stayed close to him. Ray checked his phone. She checked in online an hour ago, seat 14C. She'll come through this checkpoint. How long? I asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. We waited. The terminal filled gradually, families with too much luggage, a group of college students who clearly hadn't slept, an older couple moving slowly, the man's hand at the small of the woman's back, the way Frank used to walk beside me. I looked away from them. At 5:23 she appeared. I recognized her before Bobby did, recognized the way she moved, that particular self-possessed glide that I had watched cross my driveway and my kitchen and my living room for 2 years. She had 2 large suitcases on a cart, a camel-colored coat I hadn't seen before, sunglasses despite the hour, hair perfect. She looked like someone going on a pleasant vacation, relaxed, unhurried, completely calm. Bobby made a sound beside me, not quite a word, something lower than that. He had gone very still. Serena joined the security line, pulled her cart forward, checked something on her phone. Everything about her body language said ordinary Tuesday morning. Nothing about her suggested a woman who had cleaned out joint accounts and packed $53,000 in cash and booked a one-way flight under a name that wasn't hers. She was extraordinary at this. Standing there watching her, I understood for the first time with my whole body, not just intellectually, what Frank had been up against, what 20 months of investigation had been trying to contain. The two FBI agents moved. They approached from slightly different angles, converging on the line near Serena's position. The taller one reached her first. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you." His badge came out in a single practiced motion. Serena turned. For just a fraction of a second, less than a heartbeat, something moved across her face. A flicker of calculation, rapid and animal. Then the smile came back, easy and warm. "Of course. Is there a problem, officer?" "We have a warrant for the arrest of Linda Pruitt." The smile stayed on her face for 2 full seconds after she stopped believing in it. Then it fell. She looked left, the second agent. She looked right. Airport security positioned at the exit. She looked straight ahead at the agent with the badge, and I watched her make the assessment. The distance, the obstacles, the odds, in the space of a single breath. She ran, dropped the cart handle, stepped out of her heels in 2 quick movements, and ran in her stocking feet across the polished terminal floor. She was fast, faster than I expected, moving low and purposeful toward the far corridor. Airport security had anticipated it. 2 officers converged from the left side, cutting off the corridor before she reached it. She pulled up short, changed direction, ran 3 more steps, and was caught, both arms secured by officers who were professionally gentle and professionally firm and did not let go. The struggle lasted about 15 seconds. Then she was still. The agents moved in. One read her rights in a clear, even voice. The other reached for the cart she'd abandoned. Around us, the terminal had done what terminals do when something unexpected happens. Everyone simultaneously stopped pretending not to watch. Phones were out. People stood with their coffee cups held halfway to their mouths. The lead agent opened the first suitcase where it sat on the cart. Clothes, toiletries, a travel pillow. Normal. He moved to the second suitcase, unzipped it, lifted the lid. Even from our distance, I could see the stacks. Rubber-banded bundles of bills filling the case in neat rows. A passport in a zippered compartment. An external hard drive. Documents in a sealed plastic sleeve. The agent held up the passport and opened it. Looked at the photo, looked at Serena, looked back at the photo. "Want to explain this?" She said nothing. Her face had closed down completely. All the warmth, all the pleasantness, every carefully constructed expression, simply gone. What was left was something harder and more honest than anything I'd seen on her before. The agents brought her upright. She was cuffed, standing straight, and that's when she saw us. Bobby was 20 feet away. I was beside him. She went completely still when she saw his face. For a moment, one strange, suspended moment, something crossed her expression that I couldn't name. Not remorse, not exactly. More like the look of someone who has miscalculated a distance and is only now understanding the full measure of the mistake. Then it hardened into something else entirely. "You." Her voice cut across the terminal noise, sharp and clear. "You did this." Bobby didn't move. "You're pathetic." The words came fast now, past the agent's restraining hands, aimed like something she'd been saving. "Weak? Gullible? Do you understand how easy you were? How easy all of you were?" Bobby flinched, just slightly. I stepped forward. 1 step. Not much, just enough to be in front of him, to be between him and the words. Serena's eyes moved to me. "And you?" A sound came out of her that wasn't quite a laugh. "You interfering, meddling old woman, you have no idea what you've done. 3 years. 3 years I spent on this, building it piece by piece." Her voice echoed off the terminal ceiling. People were recording. I could see the phones in my peripheral vision. "You should have stayed in your house and minded your own business and—" "Ma'am?" The agent's voice was firm. "That's enough. And just let it happen." The agents moved her toward the security doors. She was still talking. I could hear her voice rising, then fading, then cut off entirely as the door swung shut behind them. Then silence. Or not silence exactly. The terminal had its sounds, its hum and shuffle, and the distant announcement of a gate change. But the particular noise that had filled that corner of the room was gone. Bobby stood completely still beside me. I turned to look at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the door that had closed. His hands at his sides were shaking slightly. I put my hand on his arm. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "She was right about how easy I was." "She was right that you trusted her," I said. "That's not the same thing." He looked at me. His face in the harsh terminal light looked young and tired and more like Frank than I had noticed in years. Dad tried to warn me. His voice was barely above a whisper. Multiple times. Those last months. He kept asking about her, asking questions I thought were controlling. I told him to back off. He swallowed. Last conversation I had with him. I told him to stay out of my life. He died a week later. Bobby, I never apologized. I reached into my coat pocket. I'd brought Frank's letter, the one from the hidden compartment, the one that ended he as a victim in this too. I'd been carrying it with me for days, waiting for the right moment. There is no perfect moment for some things. You just find the one that's available. Read the last page, I said, the part about you. He took it, read it in the fluorescent light of the terminal while travelers moved around us and Ray stood a respectful distance away. I watched his face. Bobby won't believe me without proof he can hold in his hands. I know my son. He loves her. He will defend her. He is a victim in this too. Remember that. Don't be angry with him. He never had a chance. Bobby stood holding the letter for a long time after he'd finished reading. Ray appeared at my shoulder. We should give statements to the FBI team. They're set up in the airport security office. A pause. Take your time. Bobby folded the letter carefully along its original creases, held it out to return it to me. Keep it, I said. He put it in his inside jacket pocket, over his heart, and we walked together toward the security office to do what Frank had spent his last months preparing us to do. 2 weeks later, we sat in the offices of the FBI field team and listened to Detective Sharon Hess lay out what they'd found. Her real name was Linda Pruitt. Born in Columbus, Ohio. She'd started small, petty fraud, identity theft, working her way up through her 20s with the methodical progress of someone treating crime as a career. The first elder fraud case they could document with certainty dated back 8 years. 6 confirmed victims across 4 states. Total estimated take across all cases, over $1.2 million. The second suitcase from the airport contained $53,000 in cash, a passport in the name Linda Brennan, and an external hard drive holding account information for banking institutions in 3 countries. The prosecutors described it as a flight kit, everything needed to become someone new. Charges filed: identity theft, wire fraud, elder abuse, theft by deception, forgery, and conspiracy. The federal prosecutor's office was coordinating with Colorado and Tennessee to consolidate. A plea negotiation was already underway. Given her prior record and the scope of the operation, Detective Hess said, the prosecution is recommending 14 to 17 years federal prison. Bobby sat beside me and listened to all of it without expression. When Hess finished, he asked one question. The men she hurt before, Eddie Sutton and Walter Pruitt, is there any chance they recover anything? Hess considered. The civil suits are possible. The asset recovery team is working on tracing the funds. I won't make promises, but it's not hopeless. She looked at Bobby. Your cooperation was essential to this, both of you. Without your statement and your mother's documentation, we couldn't have moved at the airport. Bobby nodded, didn't say anything more. On the way home, he was quiet for most of the drive. Then, stopped at a red light on Millbrook Avenue, he said, I want to write to them, Eddie and Walter. I want to, I don't know, acknowledge it somehow, what she did to their families. That would mean something to them, I said. The light changed. We drove the rest of the way home without talking, which was all right. Some silences are comfortable. We were relearning the ones between us. The annulment came through 6 weeks after the airport. Not a divorce. The marriage had never been legally valid. You cannot legally marry someone under a stolen identity. The court paperwork arrived on a Thursday morning in a plain envelope, and Bobby held it for a long time before he put it in the recycling bin without comment. He had moved back into his old room by then. Same room from high school, football trophies on the shelf, a poster for a band he no longer listened to still taped to the wall above the desk. He'd brought 2 suitcases and a box of books. I made up the bed with the good sheets and left a glass of water on the nightstand and didn't say anything about how long he could stay. He started therapy the second week. Tuesdays and Thursdays, a practice 3 miles from the house, a therapist named Dr. Okafor, who Bobby described only as direct and very annoying in a useful way. I took that as a good sign. Some days were better than others. Some mornings he came downstairs and made breakfast and talked and occasionally laughed. Really laughed, the kind that reached his eyes. Other days he stayed in his room until noon and came out looking like he'd been somewhere difficult. I learned not to read too much into either. 40 years in the ICU taught me that healing is not a straight line, and the people who expect it to be one make the process harder for themselves. I kept the coffee ready, made his favorite foods without announcing that I was doing it, left lights on in the evenings so the house felt inhabited, stayed available without hovering. It was the most nursing I'd done in years, and none of it required a license. One evening, about 6 weeks after he moved back in, I came down the hallway and heard something from the direction of the garage. I found Bobby sitting on Frank's old work stool, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that Frank had always meant to replace and never got around to. He had the work journal open on his knees, and he was reading it in the light from the single bulb overhead. He didn't hear me come in. I stood in the doorway and watched him. He turned a page, read, turned another. "This is from when I was 12, he said, without looking up. His voice was thick. "Listen." He read it aloud. "Taught Bobby to change the oil today. His hands are still small, but he holds the wrench like he means it. Didn't complain once, even when he got oil on his shirt. Listen to every word. I told him a man who knows how his car works is a man who knows how to take care of things. He said, 'What if you don't have a car, Dad?' Made me laugh for about 5 minutes. I'm still smiling writing this. So proud of that boy." Bobby closed the journal. His hands were shaking. "I barely remember that," he said. "Working on the car with him. I was so young, and then I got older and I was busy and—" He stopped. He remembered it. He wrote it down. I came into the garage and sat on the workbench beside him. The space felt different with 2 people in it. Warmer, less like absence and more like something returning. "He loved those afternoons," I said. "He talked about them for years, said you had the right hands for mechanical work." I sold his car. Bobby's voice broke open on those words. Not for the first time and probably not for the last. Everything he spent 22 years building, for a trip with a woman who was planning to destroy this family, I handed it to her for $17,000. "You didn't know. Dad tried to tell me and I chose not to listen." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "That last conversation, I can't stop hearing it. I told him to mind his own business. I told him he was being controlling. I said, 'Bobby.'" I put my hand on his arm. "Read the letter again, the part about why he didn't tell you sooner." He had it in his jacket pocket. He'd been carrying it since the airport. He took it out, unfolded it, read the underlined passage. "Bobby won't believe me without proof he can hold in his hands. She is too skilled. He loves her. He will defend her. He is a victim in this, too. He never had a chance against someone like this." Bobby sat with those words for a long time. "He knew," he said finally. "He knew I'd fight him on it. He knew you loved her. He knew she'd built something in you that couldn't be dismantled with words alone. He wasn't angry with you for that." I paused. "He was trying to protect you from something you couldn't see yet. That's not judgment. That's love." Bobby folded the letter back along its creases with the same careful hands that had, at 12 years old, held a wrench like he meant it. "I want to learn the car," he said quietly. "Everything about it, the way he wanted to teach me." He looked up. Is that crazy?" "No," I said. "That's exactly right." He put the letter back in his pocket. We sat together in the garage, surrounded by Frank's tools and Frank's workbench and Frank's radio, and the empty space where the Mustang should have been felt for the first time, like a space that could be filled again. The Saturday morning 2 months after the airport was warm and bright, the kind of May morning that reminds you why you live somewhere with actual seasons. I was in the kitchen with coffee when I heard the engine. I had heard that engine before, had been hearing it in my memory for 7 months. Low and rolling and authoritative, the voice of 22 years of careful, loving work. My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. Bobby came downstairs so fast he nearly missed the last step. We went to the front door together and opened it. Dale Whitfield was climbing out of the Mustang in my driveway. The morning sun caught the navy blue paint and held it, deep and rich, and exactly the color Frank had spent 4 months selecting, driving Dale and the paint supplier mildly insane in the process. The chrome glinted. Every line was exactly as it should be. Dale looked up at us on the porch and smiled the smile of a man completing something long overdue. "Bringing her home," he said, "where she belongs." Bobby stood beside me and didn't move. I could feel him beside me, the held breath, the stillness. "Dale," my voice came out steadier than I felt. "You paid Bobby $17,000 for this car." "I did. You can't just—" "Maggie." He walked toward us, keys in his hand. "Frank co-signed a loan for me 28 years ago, put his own credit on the line for a man he barely knew, asked nothing in return, and never mentioned it again for the rest of his life." He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "This dealership exists because of him. Everything I've built exists because he believed in me when believing in me was not the obvious choice." He held the keys out to me. "$210,000 doesn't cover that. $17,000 doesn't cover that. Nothing covers that." He paused. "But bringing this car home to his family, that's something I can actually do." I came down the steps and took the keys from his hand. Bobby hadn't moved from the porch. I turned and looked at him. His face was doing several things at once: gratitude and grief, and something I recognized as the particular expression of a person receiving something they don't feel they deserve. "Come down here," I said. He came down the steps slowly, stood beside me in front of the car, put his hand on the hood the way I'd done in Dale's garage weeks ago. Flat palm, feeling the coolness of the metal, feeling everything underneath. "I don't deserve this," he said, low, almost to himself. Dale answered before I could. "Your dad didn't think in those terms. He thought in terms of what a person could become with the right chance." He looked at Bobby steadily. "You've got a lot of your father in you, son. I've known Frank Lawson for 28 years, and I can see it from here." Bobby pressed his lips together, nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. We opened the garage together, Dale and Bobby and me, and Dale backed the Mustang into its spot with the ease of long practice. The tires settled onto the concrete, the engine cut off, the garage filled with the smell of motor oil and old leather. Frank. Dale came inside for coffee and stayed 2 hours, telling stories I hadn't heard. Frank at car shows, Frank driving Dale half crazy over a carburetor specification, Frank once talking a seller down on a set of original door handles by standing in a parking lot for 45 minutes, saying nothing at all until the man dropped the price out of sheer discomfort. "He had the patience of something geological," Dale said, shaking his head. "Infinite. He could just wait. I never learned that." Bobby laughed. A real laugh, sudden and unguarded, the kind that catches you off guard because it comes from somewhere deeper than decision. "He tried to teach me that," Bobby said. "He really tried." "It's not too late to learn," Dale said. When Dale left, he hugged us both and told Bobby to call him when they started going through the engine, that he knew a few things Frank had noted about the timing he wanted to share. Bobby shook his hand and held on a beat longer than a normal handshake. After Dale's truck turned out of the driveway and disappeared down Clearwater, Bobby and I stood in the open garage for a long time without speaking. "Next Sunday?" Bobby said finally. "What about it?" "We start." He nodded at the car, at the workbench, at the journal sitting open on the surface exactly where Frank had left it. The way he wanted to. From the beginning. With the journal. "I'll make coffee," I said. The following Sunday was overcast and cool, the kind of morning that's good for working with your hands. Bobby brought the journal to the workbench. I brought 2 mugs. We stood side by side in front of the Mustang with the hood raised, looking down at the engine Frank had rebuilt over 22 years of Saturdays. "I don't know where to start," Bobby said. I opened the journal to the page Frank had marked Teaching Bobby. The handwriting was clear and even, written with the intention of being read by someone who needed to learn. I read it aloud. "Start with the oil. Check it every time, before every drive. Before you ask anything of this engine, know that it has what it needs. A car that's taken care of takes care of you." Bobby found the dipstick, pulled it, checked the level against the marker, the way the journal showed, holding it up to the light filtering through the garage window, exactly the way Frank had described. His hands were steady, the last 3 months of therapy showing in the steadiness of his hands. "Good?" I asked. He asked. "Good." He slid it back in, clean and careful. We worked through the morning following Frank's notes, checking fluids, inspecting filters, going through each system in the order Frank had recorded them over years of Sundays. The journal moved between us as needed, one of us reading while the other worked, swapping as naturally as if we'd done it 100 times before. By midday, Bobby was explaining something to me about the cooling system that he'd just learned from the journal, his voice taking on a quality I recognized. The voice Frank used when he understood something mechanical and wanted to share it. That particular combination of precision and pleasure. I listened and asked questions and did not tell him he sounded like his father. Some things are better experienced than named. 6 weeks after we started working on the car together, on a Saturday morning in early July when the summer had settled in for real, I came out to the garage and stood with the keys in my hand. Bobby appeared in the doorway behind me. "Today?" he said. "Today." I got behind the wheel. The leather seat was cool under me. The steering wheel worn in exactly 2 places. I adjusted the mirrors the way the journal had shown, checked each thing in order, took my time. Bobby settled into the passenger seat and closed the door with the particular sound of a well-fitted door on a well-built car. I put the key in the ignition, turned it. The Mustang woke up. That sound, that deep, rolling, unhurried authority, filled the garage and came up through the seat and into my chest and settled there, warm and familiar, like something I'd been waiting to hear for a long time. Bobby laughed beside me, pure and unguarded, both hands on the dashboard, delighted despite himself. "Dad would absolutely lose his mind right now," he said, "in the absolute best way." I backed out of the garage slowly, the way Frank had done 1,000 times. Down the driveway, onto Clearwater Drive, the morning air coming in warm through the window I'd rolled down without thinking about it. We drove through town with no destination, past the hospital where I'd spent 40 years, past the elementary school where Bobby had learned to read, down Oak Street where the trees had grown together overhead to make a tunnel of green, the light coming through in pieces, through the neighborhood where Frank and I had walked on Sunday evenings for 30 years. Bobby navigated from the passenger seat when I asked him to and was quiet when I didn't. We talked some and didn't talk some and both were comfortable. After an hour, I turned for home. I pulled into the driveway, backed the Mustang into the garage with more confidence than I'd expected, and cut the engine. The silence that followed was a good silence. The satisfied quiet after something has done what it was built to do. "Dad would be so proud," Bobby said. "Of us," I said. "He'd be proud of us." Bobby looked at me. Something in his face, some last thing that had been held tight since the airport, since the letter, since the garage and the journal and all the months of difficult work, came loose. "Yeah," he said, "of us." That evening I made dinner and Bobby came downstairs and helped without being asked, chopping the vegetables the way Frank always had. The same motion, the same economy of movement, the same tendency to taste test entirely too much before anything made it to the pan. The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary and something I didn't have a name for, the particular smell of a house that is inhabited by people who are trying, imperfectly and sincerely, to take care of each other. I looked out the window at the garage. The door was closed. I thought about what Frank had built in that garage over 22 years. Not just the car, which was extraordinary, but everything else. The hidden compartment and the letter and the folder and the key. The call to Dale. The introduction to Ray. The chain of carefully placed things that led eventually to justice and to this kitchen and to my son standing at my counter doing something useful with a knife and an onion. "I'm still protecting you." He was. I sent a check to Eddie Sutton that week. $12,000 with a note. "For your mother's memory, from someone who understands." Maggie Lawson. Another to Walter Pruitt. "For your father's shop. 45 years of honest work deserves to be remembered." I had more than enough. Frank had made sure of that. I booked a trip in the fall. Not Route 66, not yet. Something smaller first. A week on the coast of Maine. Bobby said he might come for part of it if Dr. Okafor thought the timing was right. I told him we'd see. I was taken care of, financially, legally, practically. The house was mine and would remain mine. The Mustang was in its place. My son was down the hall. And somewhere in a federal correctional facility, Linda Pruitt was learning what it felt like to be exactly where she was supposed to be. One evening in late July, I went out to the garage alone after dinner. Not for any particular reason. Just to be there. I turned on the single overhead light and stood in the middle of the space with my hands at my sides, the way I had stood there that first terrible morning when the door was open and the car was gone. the tools on the pegboard, the red toolbox, the journal on the workbench, open now to a different page than the one Frank had last written on, because Bobby and I had been reading it, working through it week by week, leaving our own marks on it without meaning to. A coffee ring on the corner of one page, a pencil check mark next to a task we'd completed. I walked to the workbench and picked up the journal, opened to a blank page near the back, found a pen, sat down on Frank's stool, the one with the cracked vinyl seat, and I wrote, July 23rd. Bobby and I took the car out again this morning. Third time. He's getting better at reading the gauges, knows what to watch for. He has your hands, Frank. He always did. I just didn't see it clearly until now. The house is full, not the way it was when you were here. It'll never be quite that way again. But full enough, warm enough. You built more than a car. I think you know that. I think that was always the point. We're going to be all right. Both of us. I keep your promises too now. Love, Maggie. I closed the journal, put it back on the workbench exactly where it belonged, turned off the light, walked back to the house, where my son was watching television in the living room, and there was still half a pot of coffee on the counter, and the summer evening was warm and long and full of the ordinary sounds of a life being lived. The garage door was closed. Frank had taught me to close it. Some things you only have to be taught once.